USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to Weekend Review for Monday, January 11th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, why don't we start out with what I think is probably the biggest news from the weekend. There are no more undefeated teams. It was a weekend split with Minnesota and Wisconsin, the Badgers winning on Saturday night, keeping Minnesota to no even strength goals and getting the empty netter shorthanded late to win it 3-1. What do you take away from the weekend? I still think Minnesota is the top team in the country, but it's good to see that for the Badgers and probably good for the Gophers going forward to have had even a tiny bit of adversity.
I agree with you there, and I don't know if Cornell's undefeated team from the 70s has their version of Mercury Morris, but he can pop the champagne cork, and it will still remain the only undefeated team of all time in NCAA history. Listen, you had to lose at some point. You know, I had even said, talking to some folks at the Big Ten Network this past week, that it's healthy to lose games. The further you go in a season and you remain perfect, the more that you want to keep that perfection, and you almost sometimes can let that override just the simple fact of going out and playing your game. So it's not bad. I think that, it makes your team maybe a little bit more locker room humble. And, it also, maybe magnifies some areas that you can work on. It's hard when you're winning every night as a coach to walk into the locker room and say, guys, we're not doing this well. So when you have that loss, I think that's a big positive. As for Wisconsin, I mean, that's two very competitive games they played on back-to-back nights against the number one team in the country, showed themselves well, did a really good job, as you mentioned, kind of keeping the Minnesota power play at bay. That's a big factor. If you can, Minnesota does not score a lot of goals. They're great on the defensive end. We've been saying that since the beginning. I think that they have the potential to score more, but their defense is what is anchoring this team right now. So if you can then go and keep that power play off the board as well, you're taking a big stride. And that's what I think Wisconsin did to get that victory.
Staying in the top 10, number 2 Boston College had kind of a rough weekend, a 4-3 overtime loss at home, a 3-2 overtime win at New Hampshire. They got everybody back from the World Juniors, although Spencer Knight did not play in the 4-3 overtime loss. Is this a little bit of that same kind of adversity we were talking about? Maybe this pulls Boston College back a step or two from where people thought they might have been.
Yeah, and I'm also not sure where they are health-wise. They've had some guys banged up. I mean, Alex Newhook, we know, was banged up during the World Junior Tournament. He didn't play Sunday against UNH when they went up and beat the Wildcats in overtime. As you mentioned, they didn't play Spencer Knight on Friday. I talked to Jerry York, and he had told us earlier in the week, maybe it was Wednesday, that if Spencer was healthy and ready to go, he was going to play. And then we get to the point, here we are on Friday, and you see Henry Wilder in the net, and you say, okay, well, maybe he just wanted a little bit more rest. And according to Jerry, that's really what it was. He wanted to get a few more reps in during a practice back wearing Boston College equipment. He said that the feel of the equipment was different for him. So he takes that night off, and obviously BC, they lose that game at home in overtime. But it's tough to know if that's a good loss or a bad loss. UNH is a team that I think has a lot of great components, inconsistent at times. And I think that this weekend they showed themselves very well, easily could have won both of those games. But that's not the day in, day out UNH team that you get. So it's hard for me to kind of put into context as to whether the loss on Friday was a bad loss for BC. We'll see what happens in the polls with the voters this week. I lowered them a spot in my ballot because North Dakota, they played one game last night and they end up winning that. So I said, it's fine to make the switch between BC and North Dakota, but I didn't have them falling much further than that. I think that this was one loss, a little bit of an aberration. I think BC will be fine in the long run.
One team I did move up a couple of spots on my ballot is St. Cloud State. Two very different games. I got to watch Friday's game, a 4-3 win over Minnesota Duluth. The Huskies went out with a 2-0 lead. Minnesota Duluth comes back with 3 in a row to lead 3-2, and then the last two by St. Cloud State for the winner, and then a 1-0 overtime win on Sunday. But man, I heard good things about St. Cloud State coming out of the NCHC pod, but they are firing on all cylinders right now.
There's a lot of things to like about this team. You know, they've played 13 games. They have 14 guys that have scored goals at this point. You have 3 that have scored 5 or more, and you've got a lot of guys in the 4 or more category. I mean, there's a couple of names on that team that people recognize, in Sam Henches and obviously the goaltender David Hrenak. But I think that when you look at this team in general, it might not be names that people recognize, like Nick Perbix, a defenseman who had scored over, I think it was 55 games he had played coming into the season. He had scored, if memory serves me right, 3 or 4 goals. He now has 5 already in 13 games from the blue line, including the game winner. I believe it was on Friday night. So I mean, this is a St. Cloud team. They have played well out of the gate. They've surprised a lot of people. The one thing you do know, and maybe it's already past the point that they could be surprising teams. I don't think they are in the NCHC anymore, but the further you go, the less of a surprise this will be, and you won't be able to sneak up on any opponents. I think this is a quality St. Cloud team. Last year, their proving was more of an aberration than a norm, and I think that this will be a team that will be very difficult to beat, really, for the rest of the way.
Why don't we turn eastward again to the ECAC? Down to 4 teams, St. Lawrence, Quinnipiac, Clarkson, and Colgate. St. Lawrence finds themselves in first place coming out of the weekend. But what is pretty remarkable to me is how tight and how close all the games were over the weekend. St. Lawrence and Colgate playing to, at worst, a 2-goal differential in them, 2 overtimes, and a 1-0 win by Quinnipiac on Sunday. Essentially a split down the middle for those two teams, or pretty close to it. Pretty impressive outing for all 4 teams over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Casey Jones after Saturday's game. He was a little disappointed that his team couldn't hold on to a lead in that game, and then they did not win on Sunday, a 0-0 game into overtime. But you had a lot of games going late into that one, games going into overtimes, games going into shootout. It's proving to me that we're 5 games into the ECAC slate, and I don't think a lot separates the 4 teams that decided to play college hockey this year in that league. And it'll be interesting. What's going to happen within the league. It doesn't matter a lot. You'd love to still say that you were a league champion at the end of it all. But the league tournament, knowing these are going to be the 4 teams that face off against one another in the tournament, it should be a tooth and nail fight. There's not going to be an easy game. And, we asked Rand Pecknall this, and I mentioned to Casey Jones, it used to be that you had travel partners. You would play one opponent one night, one opponent the next night. Maybe it was easier to sweep in that. You prep for the 2 opponents, you play well against them in both games, you sweep. But sweeps are going to be very difficult. Casey Jones said to me on Saturday, he said, winning 1 is tough. Winning 2 is really tough. And then, they're playing Quinnipiac 3 in a row. 3 in a row is unheard of. So, and you're not going to see that. I just don't think you're going to see a lot of 3-game sweeps when these teams play. And I think even 2-game sweeps in a weekend where you get all 6 points. You didn't go to overtime. You didn't need a shootout. That's even going to be very difficult.
Sort of like playing a best-of-3 playoff series, and those are hard to sweep in 2 games, too. I'm thinking also when we were talking with Rand Pecknall last week about what he had to say about both Colgate and St. Lawrence. Tons of talent on that Colgate team, particularly among some of the younger players, and a trio in net that's good. But he was especially complimentary of what Brett Brecky's done up at St. Lawrence, a completely different sort of culture there is the way that Pecknall described it. And certainly the Saints are a very different team on the ice.
I think so. And, when you make a coaching change, and obviously they've had a few in the last, less than a decade, that's going to either go the positive or the negative. And, Mark Morris did not bring that program into a positive direction. unfortunately. So take a step back. Now you bring in a new head coach. He's going to put his stamp on the program. You see some of the recruits, as you mentioned, that are coming in, real talent levels, the ability to identify talent and close the deal and bring them up to upstate New York. Not always the easiest sell. But I think we're going to see St. Lawrence starting to grow back into things in the not just this season, but in years to come.
You're absolutely right about that. If you pay attention to some of the recruiting that's going on there, he's got some pretty good talent coming in the next couple of years. Well, let's take a pause and we'll come back. There's more of the weekend to recap, plus some news of the weekend. This is Weekend Review.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online.
Continuing with Weekend Review from USCHO.com, I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Let's take a look at Robert Morris. How do you overlook the Colonials? They just swept the last 3 games over Niagara, one up at Dwyer Arena and the other 2 back at home. They are a team that they find ways to win close games. They find ways to battle back. The thing that is impressive about them is that they are a big team, but they don't lack in speed. And I think that puts them at a big advantage in Atlantic hockey, where the players tend to be maybe a little bit smaller than you might find in some of the other leagues. That's just a generalization, but the Colonials are playing very well, and maybe the only team that really can contest with them for the top of the league, at least as things look right now, is AIC.
Yeah, I mean, it's now 6 in a row, all in Atlantic hockey. They had a loss against Bowling Green in their non-conference loss, but it's 9 in a row when you go all the way back to November 28th, when they started this streak within the league with a 5-4 win against Canisius. But we talked a little bit to Derek Schooley last Tuesday, and just this team has tightened things up defensively. But you mentioned it, they found ways to win games in different ways. I look at Saturday's win at home against Niagara. He maybe gave up a little bit more than they would want in terms of their defensive output, but they find a way to win in overtime, a 5-4 overtime win. They had an overtime win last Thursday on the road. Then they come back Sunday, 3 games in 4 days, whatever it is. I mean, they're in, kind of a 6-game in 11 days span or something like that. And, really dominate Niagara in a nice 6-2 victory to close things out. And, now they go right back at it. You're going to take a few days off. You get, probably take today off entirely. 2 probably light practices, Tuesday and Wednesday. And they're right back at it, heading up to Canisius. I don't know if those games, I guess maybe those games have been postponed. So I don't know if there'll be anything in their place. If not, it's a weekend they could really use off, because they have been going at it. Yes, I know when you're winning, you like to keep going, but I believe at this point, Derek Schooley would probably like a few days for his team just to maybe get some bruises healed and take some deep breaths, because they have really been playing a lot of hockey in the last 3 weeks.
Well, let's talk about some other things of note from over the weekend, sort of off the ice. As long as we're talking Atlantic hockey, Army with a win at home over AIC meant the 1,000th win for the Riley family. First father Jack Riley behind the bench starting in 1950. And then his son Rob took over. And then Rob's brother Brian, now the current head coach, 70 consecutive years, 1,000 wins for the Riley family. And now, of course, a third generation of Rileys in head coaching in Division I. But they are legendary and beloved at Army, the whole Riley crew. And you can see why, you ever get a chance to talk to Brian Riley. He's just one of the great guys in college hockey. But this is a pretty neat milestone. You always talk about records that are never going to be duplicated or broken. This is probably one of those in that category.
Well, you're never going to have 70 consecutive years where a program is coached by one family. I mean, it's like a monarchy in terms of coaching at Army West Point. And the fact that, as you mentioned, Brett Riley, now the head coach at Long Island University, he's building a program from scratch there. who knows when Brian Riley decides to retire, does he take over? I mean, you could easily be talking a full century where the same coaching last name is behind the bench. And to obviously every one of those three great coaches, legendary coaches, part of a legendary coaching family. When Jack was there, his sons were assistants. And then when Rob was there, Brian was still an assistant. Now Brian has taken it over. And is doing a fantastic job with that program. That's a big upset win. If you're going to get your 1,000th win, you might as well get it against a nationally ranked team. In Atlantic hockey, that's not something you get the opportunity to do every night. And they find a way to win that game against AIC and on Sunday. And 1,000 wins it's a great milestone. I think that is just absolutely fantastic for this family, for that program. And knowing Rob and Brian very well, hats off to them. Congratulations. And let's keep it going. Let's get another 30, 40, 50 years of Riley's behind the bench. I'm all for that.
You also mentioned earlier on about 3-on-3 overtime. And I've been skeptical along the way. And then I finally was a reluctant convert. And then I got enthusiastic about it. And now I just love it. I think that the 3-on-3 going directly to that has been terrific for the game. People get excited for it. When it was a follow-up after a 5-on-5, as it's been in previous seasons, it was like, come on, just somebody score already. But now it heightens the excitement, and teams are playing it very well. It's really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, interestingly, the leagues that had not played it in the past, I was talking to people that were watching it for the first time this year, and they're like, it's a slog, it's sloppy. There's three guys on the ice on each team. It seems like nobody knows how to play it. Well, listen, teams are learning quickly, and this past weekend was a great proof point of the games out there between Thursday and Sunday. 14 games went to 3-on-3 overtime, and 12 of those 14 games were decided in that 3-on-3 overtime. So we're at the point here where the teams are learning how to play it. Maybe teams are going to have to learn how to defend it a little bit better, but we're seeing a lot of ability to skate, open ice skating out there. The passing, I think, has gotten a little bit crisper. I watched the 3-on-3 between UNH and Boston College on Friday night, and BC got a too many men in the ice call, so maybe changing players not the easiest thing, especially the long change. But then you throw in the 4-on-3 power play. I thought UNH executed that really well. So there's a lot that we're going to continue to see and learn off of this 3-on-3 overtime. But you're right. I think it's a good advancement for the game, getting there right away, not going through 5 minutes of what I always thought could become laboring overtimes. Teams would get a little bit tired and they would stop and not try to win. I feel like teams are more enthusiastic about trying to win the game in overtime rather than forcing it into a shootout.
Finally, over the weekend, the 51st and final team for this season got underway. That's BU. They got blown out in the first game of the series and returned the favor with a high-scoring game against Providence the next game. First of all, I don't think either Albie O'Connell or Nate Lehman were all that happy about how many goals were given up, but it was good that BU got underway. But that really leads into a bigger thing, the amount of high-scoring games. I'm feeling just like you are on this, that it seems like there is a lot more scoring this year. Probably could sit down and crunch the numbers, but it does seem that way. Do you have any thoughts on why that's happening? And personally, I think if it is happening, it's great.
Yeah, for fans, for media, it's great. For coaches, it's great hair. I don't know why it's happening. I don't have a conclusive data point that says goal scoring is way up. I haven't, looked at where we are in number of games played this year against last year, and we're really off. It's difficult to make an apples to apples comparison. But maybe it's the fact that teams have had the opportunity to practice together more, play together more, that line units, power plays feel maybe a little bit more connected because they are on the ice or were on the ice. For most of these programs had, 40 to 50 practices before they played a single game, as opposed to certain seasons where you might not even practice, have a full on practice before you lace them up for your first game. So I don't know why scoring is up, but it certainly does seem to be. I will find a number cruncher, or maybe I'll take some time myself and try to figure out what the delta is. But it does feel like we're probably up on average somewhere around a goal and a half a game minimally. And so that's a big data point. That's a lot. I'll try to actually run the numbers and try to figure it out, but it feels like a lot of goals have been scored thus far.
Well, in any case, I've seen more, probably say a larger variety of college hockey this year than any other season. I've got to watch just about every league, just about any night of the week. And, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. I think the brand of college hockey, the style of play is so compelling for hockey fans that anybody who doesn't know the college game or hasn't been exposed to it is really missing out.
No doubt. And this is the best time to watch it. I mean, I know the NHL will come back this Thursday, but get your fix. I mean, there's so much good college hockey product out there right now, and you have ways to consume it. I look at leagues like Hockey East that is using the College Sports Live platform to provide every single game free. If you don't have NESN, I guess, and you're in New England, you'll miss some of the NESN games, but everything else you can find a way to watch right on that College Sports Live platform. So yeah, I can't push enough for fans to get out there and watch more, because it's a great product. It seems like a great year for the teams that are playing. The kids really want to go out and put forth a great effort. So enjoy it while you can.
Well, that'll do it for Weekend Review. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.